Jennifer, take it away.
Thank you. Happy mid-morning, everybody. You getting a little hungry? Well, I only have 145 slides, so we should be out of here at 2, 3 o'clock. As Steve said, I'm the Director of Research at Insider Inc. Who here is familiar with Insider Inc? Oh, that's more than I thought. Okay. Business Insider is our biggest publication, so more of you may be familiar with that. We also have a number of other properties. Insider is more of the lifestyle focus. We do a lot of work on social with that, and we have a bunch of sub-brands that really go down the rabbit hole of whatever you're into. So that could be dessert or cheese or design. We also have Markets Insider that's more focused on Wall Street and tech, obviously on tech. But Insider Inc., which was launched in January of this year, really the intent there was to unite all of our media properties together under one umbrella. So much like Vox Media or Discovery Communications, and even though all of these properties are pretty much distinct in terms of the content that they're covering, they all share similar things such as an editorial voice or a consistent approach to storytelling, and especially our audience. And we have an audience of incredibly engaged people. I'm showing you page views here, but there's a lot of virality in terms of sharing of the content, watch time on a lot of our videos, and we're doing this because we're helping them accomplish goals that they have in their life or fulfill information needs. So for example, 28 million people were watching a Fidelity series on how to be a better investor. And 4 million people came to us to figure out whether they needed to upgrade their iPhone to the 10 or they could just stay with the 8. And 37 million people, this is the fun stuff, they were indulging their cheese cravings by watching our video series, The Great Cheese Hunt. And so we're seeing a lot of positive growth across the board in all of our traffic, even though some of our competitors in the more traditional space are staying flat or even kind of struggling in today's climate because it's very crowded. People's attention is split among television. Just forget about all of the properties that are digital native, but you have television and you have print media as well. We do this because we know how to break through and really get our ethos kind of across. We follow our audience and what they like and what they're interested in, not the trends. So we're not trying to push out a lot of clickbait here, but our editors and our writers are really writing from a place in which they are the audience. So they're following topics of interest that are interesting to them. And then they write about them in inspirational ways, and you get to the quick of what we're trying to talk about. If you've ever seen a Business Insider article, you know that we set up everything. We have the headline, and then we have a couple bullet points about what you're going to learn, and then we cut to the quick of what the content's about. And if you want to go down, you know, and get more information, you can either stay with us or you can go to another place and find out more about cryptocurrency. But, for example, because that's a huge topic for us. But we set it up and we try to address a breadth of information, infinitely wide and infinitely deep. But even though this audience that we know to be very, very engaged from the statistics that we're getting on social, for example, we don't really know what's driving their behavior, right? I started in October of last year, and with any new job, you're trying to get a sense of who the audience is, and you're kind of grasping at any research that might be there. So you start with first party. Well, they didn't really do any research on their audience, which is pretty remarkable for being around for 10 years solid and not having a good sense. They had a hypothesis, but not a really truly good sense of who their audience is. And Google Analytics wasn't exactly helping us with that. They were giving us some demographics, but they're not really cutting into the hearts and minds of what's driving this audience and why they're so engaged with our content. ComScore wasn't really helping us either. I mean, we can go down and understand verticals, a little bit broader on demographics. Again, not getting at that driving behavior so much. But what we did know is that audience maybe a little bit more male on the Business Insider side, a little bit more female on the insider side, that they're basically millennials. Well, that's great, because we're hearing from our marketing partners that they're really wanting to laser focus in on millennials. But this is somewhat problematic, as we've seen a number of different headlines pop up, and this is just a smattering from the past month. I, for one, am kind of sick of hearing the word millennial, and we really wanted to move away from this idea because, again, we're talking about a generation and not really understanding them at a deeper level. For one, there's a whole lot of kind of loaded connotations that come with this group, right? Some of them are negative, they're job hoppers, they don't care about brands, they're broke, they eat too much avocado toast. But then there's also positive ones associated with this group, right? And they can be just as charged and just as dangerous as anything else, because this is an enormous group of people. It's 83 million people, and the age span is huge. It's 22 to 37. And you're ascribing these characteristics to a group of people, and it cannot possibly be true of all of them. Right now, we're living in a great era in which we have an abundant amount of data, and we have the technology to locate and target in on these guys, and yet we, publishers, and we, brands, are still very much traditionally focused on lasering into what is essentially a demographic. We don't want to do that. Age 22 to 37 is not a target, it's a family reunion. We have people at one end of the spectrum who are just getting out of college, and their wants and their needs are very, very much different than somebody who's 37 and they're in the middle of having a family and they're moving up the career level. If you as a brand are speaking to them in the exact same way, this is not going to be an effective way of targeting. So what we wanted to do is set out and bust the myth of this millennial and really kind of move away from this buzzword and hone in on a target that's much more understandable and one in which we can model, and one that's based on a mindset. So we set out on a journey to understand this target, to find them. So we had a theory that they're out there, right? If all of the positive connotations that we're throwing onto millennials, that they're influential change agents, that they are brand loyal, all of these positive things, that they want bigger purpose in their lives. If millennials are the milk, then we want the cream of that milk to be this group of people who are super actionable. And we're hoping, obviously, at the same time, that this is going to represent a significant portion of our readership. So here's how we did it. We partnered with Digitas because we heard from them that they were having a lot of the same struggles with their brand partners. Really want to focus on the millennials. They knew it wasn't effective. The ROI wasn't there after they did, recaps of their media spend. So we teamed up with them, and we worked with a third-party research company that is really very focused on younger generations, such as millennials or Gen Z. They know them at a pretty deep level. And we did a two-phase study. The quantitative is to prove that they are there and also get an idea of the sizing in the market. And then the qualitative phase is a follow-up where we go just a little bit deeper in terms of different verticals and understanding more about how they live their lives. Like, how do they invest? How do they feel about money? How seriously do they take parenting? How do they travel? I mean, all of this 360 kind of view to get a much better, deeper look at this group. And just a quick word about the universe that we started with. We didn't want to go to the general population too young or too old, we weren't really focusing in on people who are already digital information seekers. That's where we wanted to start, because we knew that that's kind of the core of us, and it's the kind of the core of a lot of publications right now. But we wanted to understand within that realm that the hypothesis is that maybe, this cohort that we're trying to define is a little younger, but they're also going to reach into older generations such as Gen X and up. So, did we find them? Yes, we did. And we're calling them the Transformists. And there's a reason behind their name, and if I remember to tell you what that is later, I will. But we've sized them to about 40 million people who, again, are united by this mindset. They are majority millennial. About 2/3 of them are millennial, but they're reaching into Gen Xers and boomers. They're shaped by our rapidly evolving digital world, so they're leaning into tech. Tech has allowed them to do everything that they want to do. It is just a tool in their tool belt to get where they want to be and achieve their goals. They're passionate and ambitious and restless is a big thing that we saw here. That when we spoke to them in the focus groups, people were saying, I don't like this about myself, but I'm never satisfied. And it's that kind of attitude that is creating this forward momentum in their lives. Everything is, how do I get better? I've achieved this goal in my career. I want to be an entrepreneur now. I want to be a better parent. And they see themselves as change agents. So they're precisely the people that marketers have had in mind all along that they were ascribing to millennials and millennials only. So we see now that this is a mistake. The good thing is technology has allowed us to laser in on these guys and find them much easier than it had been in the past. So here are 6 kind of overarching themes that really describe the Transformists. 1, they're voracious learners. They're constantly looking across a number of different sources. They're pretty agnostic about those sources. It just has to be a source that they can depend on. It could be digital, it could be print, it could be podcasting, but they are learning all the time. They're more likely to consume not only the sources, but the different kinds of content within those sources to address every piece of their lives. They're more likely to take a class, even if it's something they don't necessarily know about. And what they do with the information that they gather is they triangulate to a hyper degree. It's almost obsessive to make sure that they're getting all of the information and then they're drawing their own conclusions about that. And that could be about, an article about politics. It could be an article about where to travel next. Not only are they gathering this information, they're actually acting on it. This was another big theme that we heard in the focus groups. Nobody is reading the paper and putting it down and not doing anything with it. They are reading articles and they are going deep. For example, my husband is totally a transformist. We are going to San Antonio in a couple weeks. He's trying to figure out every place that we should hit and every place that we should eat, much more importantly. And he said to me, I think I got to the end of the internet. But this is what they're doing. So he's putting this together in a spreadsheet, and we are going to do every last one of those things. They're unapologetically, if I could say that word once right, that would be amazing. They're ambitious and adventurous. And again, this is everything in their lives. Big time in their careers. They want to move up the ladder. A lot of them tell us that they have the intent of starting their own business or going to business for themselves. Where they are in the scheme of things right now, again, not satisfied. They are quick to say that they think that they're more curious than other people. This goes back to the sheer amount of different sources that they read and the different types of content that they read. They like trying new things, and that even includes new brands. They're inspirational idealists, so purpose is a big deal in their lives. especially around brands. The millennials have been painted as, kind of a nouveau me generation. Transformists, they are anything but. Everything is all about making their lives better, but within the context of making the world a better place as well. They're more likely to volunteer. We see them trying to align themselves with brands that have a higher purpose than just turning profits. So REI comes up a lot in discussions, or Tom's Shoes. And they're as influential as they are influenced. This is a two-way street. So information gatherers, this includes looking to their peers, friends, colleagues for information and input about what should I do next, or I'm going to buy a car. What is your experience with Volvo or whomever? But this also turns around. People look up to these guys, these transformists, to help them with advice going forward. And so they're much more likely to be very selective about the brands that they align with in that regard. Because if they're making a recommendation, they want the brand to be able to stand behind it. And finally, they're brand loyal, and they live by their values. So when they see a brand they like, they stick to it. But the key here, and this is not just for brands, but it's also for publications as well, to keep in mind, you yourselves have to make sure that you're delivering on the promises that you've already set up in your communications. So they're really not going to look on, let's say, Pepsi with, it's more of a gimlet eye towards Pepsi after they had that disastrous Kendall Jenner advertisement with the play on the Black Lives Matter movement. It just seemed very disingenuous to them, and they can see right through that. Again, because they're constantly triangulating, they're getting information. I think Bob said people, they just can see through all of that. So transformists really do stand out from the crowd. I mean, I know this is just a very quick overview of who these guys are, but who of you would say that you're a transformist or you know people who are like this? That's good. That's very encouraging. We all know this person. They share, this mindset. So that's what's really driving them. And a couple more things about them. They tend to have higher income or being more educated. Surprisingly, they are not coastal elites. They're not overly liberal. They're really very much across the spectrum politically, and they're scattered throughout the U.S. They tend to be a little bit more gravitating toward urban areas than suburban. They have more diverse interests. We saw that. They're opinionated. They're not shy about sharing their opinion. They live their lives intentionally. They're super mobile, and they're super social. And then, again, with the information, they're podcast subscribers. So I bet a huge amount of Gina's group in the NPR, the podcast listeners, are made up of these transformists. And they're TV program streamers. So they're still watching TV. They're just watching it differently. They're not necessarily cord cutters. So why do they matter? There are 38 million people who don't need their hands held. They read and research, they go, they do, they buy, and then they turn around and they influence others. They're a powerful cohort, much more so than one based solely on age. So I've talked a lot about this and how this is going to help brands because that's really how we did it. But here's some things to keep in mind as publishers, right? We want to speak to them in the same way. Transformists are researchers or influencers, so we should offer quality content to them that informs and inspires them, that is unbiased, that is giving them the information that they need. They're hyper-digital, so they're on mobile and social, like I've said. You need to be everywhere that they are. They're relentlessly ambitious, so find smart ways to help them achieve their goals. They have tons of them. They're curious and open to taking risks. Indulge them in adventure and have some fun. And finally, they're as demanding of everyone around them as they are of themselves. This includes brands, this includes publications. So demonstrate your values align with ours. And that's